Okay, so I started doing this video and messed up what I was saying so badly, I am restarting it. But as I was saying, I'm going to ask about both the things that you asked me about, and we're going to start with acting, and then we're going to go on to real estate. I'm going to use the card that I pulled a minute ago, because I think it was the right one. But I just got like so tongue-tied, I was like, I've got to restart it. Anyway, so this was the card I pulled, and it's really funny because this is literally like the acting card. It says the Fool, and it's like a Shakespearean fool. He'd be like an entertainer, but he was also the one person who'd be like allowed to say what he really thought, speak his mind without getting any repercussions. So it's also a card of being like a very emotionally revealing, which I think is what acting sort of does, step into sort of the mask, but in a way that actually reveals the truth about something, Anyway, it was cool when I pulled the card out, and it was like the acting card, but yeah, I had to start again. Anyway, right now at the moment, I feel like there's just some tension around the acting aspect of things. Still feel like you're going to auditions and stuff, but it's like I just get this very kind of tense, headachy feeling. Like right now, it's just not flowing for you super well. And it's interesting because I do feel like you're putting a lot into it, but it almost like it's not being fully received. And I think that's just a blockage that's going on right now. Where as much as you might feel like you want this acting thing to, really take off any day now, it doesn't feel like it's the exact right time at this moment. And I almost feel it's like, on top of other things, like it's like you can do even better. And I feel like you're kind of still going through some stuff where it's like really gonna be getting more in touch with your emotions and more clarity on your own life and kind of stuff that you've been through and how you're processing that. And because I think that's one of the things I feel tension around right now, like there's so much sort of emotional stuff there that it's like it's there, that there's this heavy emotional stuff that you deal with that you want to kind of unravel, but it hasn't really been sorted through fully right now. And it's like, in order to really fully bring that sort of emotion into acting, in order to really bring it on screen, you have to first kind of untangle all those knots that consist inside of it. Because, when you're trying to get into the emotion of something and maybe you connect it with a memory or feeling, whatever, but you haven't made your peace with that feeling, you hold it at a distance. So, when something brings up something that might be uncomfortable for you, even though you're trying to tap into that emotion, on some level, you don't really want to touch it. You don't want to get into it, don't want to have to explain it. And then you sort of create this dissonance between you and what you're trying to portray and what you think that you want right now. And it doesn't fully come through the way that you want it to. And maybe that's why other people aren't connecting with it right now as much as you'd want them to. So I feel like something you can do to really, get more success in the future of acting and to really connect with it more on like this visceral level, is you've got to kind of go through your emotions, deal with the stuff that you haven't fully dealt with by now, be more willing to face those emotions on your own with other people, whatever it is. You have to be comfortable with them and accepting of them and understand where they come from before you can, bring them into the acting studio or whatever. I feel like you're much more comfortable with maybe more positive or comedic maybe roles, or even if you don't feel that way on the outside, that's kind of where the energy is. Because I think that's easier to portray because it doesn't connect to anything negative. And even though maybe you feel more at home in something that's more heavy, you're like, oh, I could connect to that, that's where you're sort of holding back. So I feel like you're not even meant to really get like a big break or whatever until you emotionally are ready to give all of that and to be in those feelings and to be really emotionally honest, because you can't do it on screen if you can't do it in your real life. But that's not to say that nothing good in acting is coming up. I feel like right now, if there's just more work kind of behind the scenes that has to be done, that you have to do in order to be ready for something bigger. And I feel like you might get like some little stuff this year. Again, stuff that might be lighter, easier to deal with. And also, I think that's necessary because I also think you're putting so much energy into also the real estate stuff right now, and you really have to, I think I told you this before, you have to get that settled, and I think a lot of that drive and that positive emotion is going into that. So you're probably more focused there. And once you feel more naturally confident in that, I think the acting stuff will have more opportunity to have its moment. Like I said before, I think the energy around acting is going to turn around, possibly starting at the end of this year. Sorry, I'm just really thirsty. I keep seeing like October as a possible time for the energy to really shift. Of course, it's going to depend on a lot of things. Timing is very inconsistent, so, never read too far into an exact month or year or anything. But I think the end of this year is going to be a time just of more emotional honesty for you. Because I really feel now you're trying to be this much more happy, positive person and disconnect from, maybe if you feel like you lean too far into negativity earlier. Or, before in your life, maybe you're thinking, oh, I was too negative all the time, I revealed too much, I was too much of a victim. And now you're really trying to lean into the positive. And both of these things are true at the same time. You can be a positive, optimistic person and also someone who deals with a lot of doubt, worry, insecurity, Everyone has many sides to them. You're not just one or the other. And it's okay to be multifaceted like that. And to have good moments, and really bad moments, and maybe at the same time feel like, stuff's kind of bothering me. I'm not 100%, but I'm gonna go into the day with a positive attitude. You can do one or the other. You can do both at the same time. A lot of different ways to feel, but never feel like you have to be the mask all the time. You should never be like, okay, I'm going to force a smile on my face constantly, and I have to come off positively, and it's got to be perfect, and I can't show any insecurity, any weakness, any vulnerability. You should never be at that stage where you're like, we feel like you just got a mask on all the time. It's okay to show the concern, the vulnerability, the fear, the emotion. And, no one's going to judge you for having a bad day or a negative thought. You'd be right if you're like, it's not good to be negative all the time, to constantly be complaining, to constantly say the pessimistic thing. That's not good for you. It's not good for the people around you. It drags you down when you're entirely in that energy all the time. But that doesn't mean that, all of those feelings go away and that you can't still have those thoughts. You can't sometimes express how you're feeling when you're not in a good spot, or you just have a negative thought. Actually, I feel like forcing that happy, happy, happy all the time is something that energetically, like I said, holds the real emotion off and disconnects you from the actor. The more real you are, the more you're able to really express what's under the mask, the more you hold that acting energy close. Because acting requires so much genuine vulnerability. And I think every time you lean into how you really feel, if it's happy, if it's sad, if it's somewhere in between, and you really let yourself feel that, let yourself express that, you open yourself up more to acting opportunities. And it's something I see that's coming through your solar plexus chakra, which is work. It's how you present yourself, the job you do, the way you connect and kind of show yourself to other people and how they see you. And you might think, if I express some negative thoughts, I had a bad day, whatever, I'm turning that energy off, or I'm pushing people away. But that's not true. It's the opposite. As long as what you're expressing is genuine, and you're expressing it with the desire to, have your emotions recognized, to connect with someone else, to, maybe remove that negativity by expressing it and having it addressed, or talking about it, or just getting it out, whatever it is, you actually strengthen the solar plexus, and you draw people closer. You draw all your solar plexus desires, which revolve around socializing, around work, closer. And I think you open the way to, better acting jobs. And people are going to feel drawn to you, and you become magnetic when you do this. And I think people are, never mind by the time you get there in person, like, when you are living like this, when you are being genuine, when you're willing to really feel your feelings, put yourself out there, it's like you yourself as an entity become magnetic. And someone might just be looking at like your resume or whatever, and just your name will be magnetic, your face will be magnetic, like they will feel you genuinely because your energy is becoming so strong. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that when you are living very genuinely, when you're aligning yourself with what is necessary to be an actor, then people feel you very strongly. You're magnetic when you're in the room with them, whatever emotion you're trying to portray. It's like, I feel like now it's not really reaching them in the same way. It's like stopping itself, but they are going to feel that when you're able to keep that chakra completely open, do it genuinely, and act with the desire of having your own true feelings felt. That's when your intention comes through. And I'm going to take another card for that as well, just to see about acting stuff that might come up in the future, or anything like that. This might end up being a bit of a long video. Ooh, fun. I feel like another frustrating thing is maybe, you want more of a central role, and those haven't been what you're getting as much of. Because I know, it's like, I'm sure you see your own capability, and like, you're like, I could do that. I could be a main character. I could, I could be dynamic. I could be whatever people want me to be. And you really want to be given that chance of being very central. Sorry, just thinking for a second. Somehow I feel like maybe the kind of stuff you're trying to go after sometimes, like, it's not really what you are meant to do next. Okay. I don't know if this has anything to do with maybe something you've tried out for or wanted to try out for recently. But it's like, I don't feel like you're supposed to be in a stereotypical hero role right now. Like, maybe what your idea of what, like, I don't know, maybe you tried out for like a superhero movie, or you like the idea of being in one, or you see yourself, I don't know, want to be given the chance of being this main character, kind of like hero role, but I feel like that's not actually what's 100% aligned with you. Like, your next role, or the stuff you're going for, it shouldn't be, like, it shouldn't be, like, the face of, like, goodness. Like, you shouldn't be chasing something just because you're like, that is a hero, that is a really main person, a good person. I feel like you're not even really meant to do, like, a role if it would be too boring or too in a box. And, like, you're not aligning with something that would objectively say, like, this is the good person in the story, this is, like, or the person who's good at everything. Like, there's not much complexity to those roles sometimes. And as much as they tend to be main character roles or whatever, they don't take a lot of nuance, and they don't always show a great deal of genuine vulnerability. And I feel like, especially when it comes to, like, I don't know, a superhero movie or something, they're so plot-driven, and not these days, not enough, like, character-driven, not really that interesting. And I feel like when you're meant to do something, it's gonna be much more nuanced than that. And I think I told you this, like, I see you being a significant character in something that could come up anywhere starting from, like, the end of this year. Might not be right then, might be, next year, or maybe the year after, but it feels close, feels like it could be coming up in the next, like next year or something. And I know we've talked about this. I said it's not going to be like an objectively, good role. It's like, I feel like this character is a little shady and not objectively evil, but like, it's kind of like a mysterious character, and I think it's a mysterious show, and you're going to be like, what's he up to? And it might lean more towards the villainous side, as like a character that you can't trust, or the audience doesn't know if they can trust. And definitely kind of like a creepy vibe, and maybe the main character, doesn't trust this guy. And I see, like, a lot of nighttime shooting, potentially. And I know I said, like, not a movie, like a TV show. Like one of those kind of streaming TV shows, sometimes they only make 6, 8, 10 episodes or whatever. Probably one of those, like, hour-length kind of shows. And I think this is gonna be an interesting role, because, unless you're doing something like super, super, like, black and white, it's like, if you're playing a villain or kind of a dubious character, you're probably not supposed to play them as someone who thinks they're the villain, right? Every person always thinks that they're doing the right thing or that they should be doing what they're doing. So even if this character does turn out to be kind of like more of a bad guy, you have to get into that with the idea of like, what's this person's real motive and why is he doing this, and what, in his head, what's the positive objective here. And it makes you look at that character and go like, well, he's not the villain in his head. And to really think on what's going on and how you want to play that. And, how do you get kind of that objective and that sincerity to come through something that would otherwise just be read as very sinister and nefarious to the audience if you're not careful. Because, you don't want to come off just like one note or too obviously as like a villain. You want to leave room for, people to be able to speculate. You're like, is that a good guy? Is that a bad guy? Like, what's really going on? Because I feel like it's a mysterious kind of show. I don't think they want anything to be too obvious. It's probably going to have some twists and stuff in it. So you never want to come off too stuck in one portrayal. You gotta find all the little pieces of that. And be like, okay, who does this character think he is? And then that's how you create a really interesting and like fan favorite character. I think that's what gets people noticed for their acting skills, when it's not all too obvious. When you see all the thoughts going through someone's head, when you see the reasons why they're acting in a certain way, when you put all those emotional layers in there. That's what gets someone noticed. So I think it's going to be a really cool show, and don't worry if you're not like this main central character. You're definitely an integral character, and one that people are supposed to be watching. But yeah, you need that good observational skills of, the character in the show, and also of yourself. If you want to come through with all sincerity. That being said, I think you're going to have a lot of fun on it. Like, even if it's got like a serious, spooky atmosphere, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, I feel like there's a strong possibility that's coming up by sometime next year. But yeah, you've got to be really willing on every level to accept something big like that, take on a challenge, to have the time and energy to put into it. And to take on a role, even if it's not the most central one, even if it's not like, an obvious good guy sort of situation. Just don't be afraid to play a different type of character and lean into all the different aspects, all the nuance of what that would look like. Even if there's some really disturbing stuff going on, don't be afraid to go there. Just really commit to what you're doing. Because until then, I still feel like some restlessness, towards the acting thing. But I think that's also, like I said, just because your mind's not fully there because of the big focus on real estate and studying and everything. And you need the time to focus on the internal work and also to really dedicate yourself, on the soul level, to wanting to pull in something that's big. If you really think that you can emotionally get into it, if you really think that you have the time and the energy and everything. Because if you can't fully commit to something like that, it's not going to come up yet. One moment. Okay, so now I'm gonna look into the real estate thing. Hopefully I'm gonna make sense when I talk about this, because I truly do not know a lot about real estate and what you call everything and all the details of it. So I apologize if my terminology is lacking, or if certain parts sound a little vague and you gotta fill in exactly what I mean with your own knowledge of the business. I always really like this card. It's pretty. And I feel like real estate's like a super interesting thing kind of for you to be in, of all things. I feel like it opens your mind in a very new way. That maybe you hadn't really been leaning into before, maybe other people never expected of you. Like I said, when you originally told me, I never really thought of you in real estate. I guess because, I always think, you're into, very creative endeavors, and you're very outside the box sometimes. But I think, through real estate, it's just a different expression of all that, a new way for you to think about things, a new way for you to apply creativity or come up with different solutions. The artist sees things so many different ways, has so many ideas, can think of things other people didn't, and is very, able to kind of bend themselves into different roles and take on things that maybe no one expected of them. Sometimes they can just blend so easily into anything. So yeah, I think this opens your brain in a different creative way. And I think real estate's more of what they call a left brain sort of thing. Less abstract, more logical. More, figures, numbers, important information that you've got to remember. And I feel like, when you're actually used to more abstract stuff, it's almost like this is the creative thing, because it's the thing that you haven't really done before, and a very new way to look at stuff. So I feel like this expands your mind in a way, and it tests your abilities. Maybe they aren't the thing that you imagine you would be really naturally good at, or the thing that other people would imagine be really naturally good at. But it gives you a chance to try new things out and to expand your own idea of yourself and see what you can do. And that's exciting, of course, to take on something new, to do what's never really been done before. But then that's also really intimidating if you feel like, you have to constantly be trying really hard. Like you're behind, you need to catch up because it's not a field you've been in for a long time. Sometimes maybe you feel like, I feel like sometimes it feels like, you're having a great time, you're fitting in, it's all coming together, and then sometimes maybe you feel like you're sort of the outsider, you can't do it, you're not used to this, you're different, you'll never get it, Like sometimes it feels natural and sometimes it feels so unnatural. And you start to feel like you stand out, in a negative way. But I think, as in all things, can be really beneficial to be unique, to see things in a different way, to express things in a different way. Because, if everybody in anything, if everyone in real estate thought of things the same way, pitched things the same way, spoke the same way, it'd just all be the same, there'd be no difference. There'd be no being good or bad at it. It wouldn't be interesting. You'd never stand out. So I think, as long as you have that fear of, I don't want to stand out, I want to be really, technical, really like everyone else is showing me to be, copy what other people do, then you're really, clamping down on yourself. You're not letting yourself really see what you can do. Not really kind of showing people your light. When you get too technical, if it feels like, or, you're trying to emulate someone else too much, just copy what you learned exactly, then, your heart's not really in it. You're not really putting yourself into it. You're just, like you're wearing that mask again. And then you're not being genuine, and again, you're pushing people away. But when you take your own approach to things, and you get creative with it, you let your own personality come out, you don't worry about being an exact way, you loosen up, that's when you're being genuine. And that's when people are going to connect to you, and when they're going to, you're going to stick in their head, because it's not going to be the same person over and over and over again. And I think you need to have a belief in yourself that you can both be very knowledgeable in your field and, get everything right and make good sense and build people's confidence in you, and also be unique and bring that sort of artist flair to it and show personality and really connect to people on that genuine level. Both are possible. And I think that's what's going to make someone really good at this job, when they can be super personable and stand out from the crowd while still being competent and gaining that trust. I feel like right now there's still that very shaky sense of self. You're worried too much about how you're coming off, how you're going to come off, if you're going to do a good job, and you're causing, again, some tension. I'm not sure how to go about this all. And when you do that, you just dim the light more and more. You just have to come through this, like all things, you have to come through it with it authentically. And just don't be afraid to put a spin on things. I know you said you might do some different types. I don't know all the types of real estate. But I think you do really well with, I keep saying, you have such a great eye for things, and I mean that very genuinely. So good at, decorating, I think seeing things spatially, really bringing that artistic sensibility to this. So you would definitely do well with anything that I think, when you do residential or stuff, there's staging and all of that. And you definitely excel at anything that you have to put together like that. Or anything, even if it's for something in a bigger building or whatever. I think anything where your opinion on how things should look, anything with interior, decorating sort of stuff, design would really give you an edge on things. Because, when people are just super technical and just memorize a bunch of, facts and numbers or whatever, they're not really bringing any sort of color to what they're doing. But if you kind of also add in that ability to know what looks good and to have that eye for design and be able to talk with people about, either if they're, selling stuff, what would look good if you have to do the arrangements, whatever, or if someone's looking to buy, and you can be like, oh, you could do this with the room, you could do that with the room. It's really versatile, Have you ever thought of that? Like, that could be something that's really an extra skill that you have to help people see a vision. Because, when people come in and they look at something, they're only seeing the room as it, or the building, or whatever it is, as it is. The color it is, where the furniture is, the whole setup they've got, and, not everyone can see the potential and what something should look like. But, if you can, then you could help also walk someone through that of like, you could do this, you can do that. This is what could be changed. This is something that would look really good. Any creative sort of input ideas you have, I think, would be such an asset that would make you stand apart. So I think when you lean into like the artistic side of this, now you're doing something sort of niche. And people are going to remember that and they're going to respond to it. Sorry, give me a minute. When it comes to stuff you talked about, like trying like land acquisition or whatever, I feel like that's more intimidating. Like, that's where you kind of need those big connections with people, and where people can, I feel, come off sort of intimidating, or it's kind of stressful when it comes to all this really big stuff. And I think you just need to know that you're very capable of making a good impression, and that you don't have to be afraid that people can tell now that you're new at this, or feel that you're coming up short in some way. You just have to come forwards with that confidence. And, just don't try not to show if you're doubting yourself. Because when people think that you doubt yourself, and they doubt you. So when you talk with confidence and, again, just come up with any ideas, come across genuine, because I feel like you've always just got to bring real personality into this stuff. And not come off like robotic or anything. I think the more that you show personality, the more people like you. And really, I feel like people will like you and want to work with you. And even though it feels more intimidating, I think you could actually be pretty successful with, like the land stuff. I think people are gonna actually very much take to you. It's just as long as you really bring your own flair to it. And, I really feel like don't try to change anything about how you're doing things just to be impressive. You've gotta just, be a real person, really try to connect with people. And, if you're good at your job, and you know what you're talking about, and you're personable, people are gonna like you, and there's no reason they're not gonna go with you. The more confidence you have, the more successful you are. And I definitely feel like that artistic side of you gives you a real edge. So I'm not seeing anything negative coming up, except that you really have to start having that confidence in yourself and stop worrying so much. And just let things flow naturally. Because, I think you're already good at it. And, you're already who you are. You don't have to try to be anything different. Not really getting any exact timelines on anything right now. Though I also don't know exactly where you are in the process or what you're working on at the moment. But I feel like right now you're still, you're building your capabilities. I guess you're still studying for some of this stuff. And I feel good about that. And actually I feel very calm about that. And I think you should feel calm about that because I think you're doing well. And there's no need to get overwhelmed and there's no need to panic, worry, whatever. I'd actually get a really good vibe around this whole thing. And I feel like it's just really, you should just be really chilled out, excited to learn, excited to get experience. Because, it's also exciting. I feel like you're learning stuff all the time, expanding your mind, and I think you like to learn stuff, you like to know new things. You've actually got a very curious mind with, a lot of space to store new information, even if you think you have a bad memory. I feel like, when it comes to stuff you're really interested in and you want to learn and you want to retain, I think you will. And I feel like you're just going to be more and more excited to kind of add your own sort of personality into this and really see what you can do with it. I think it's going to be very good for your root chakra as well, which is, sense of self and sense of stability, your personal power. With this, you feel like you really stand on your own 2 feet. Like you can do more than you gave yourself credit for or other people gave you credit for. Maybe people thought, oh, you'd never have like a stable job or you could never do anything serious or whatever. If you've ever heard anything like that, that's obviously not true. And you're more than capable of accomplishing any number of things. And you should never hold limiting beliefs of yourself or let other people influence you into holding those sort of beliefs. And I think you should listen more to people's compliments and when they tell you that you're good at something, whether it's this or something else. Because, I think people say those things genuinely, and there's a lot of things about you that I'm sure would be very impressive, that people genuinely admire. And I think in certain ways, people sometimes really wish they were more like you. You can be really inspiring to people when you're just really earnest in what you're doing. And when people can see you genuinely care about something, genuinely love something, or interested in something, whether it's work, a hobby, just something fun for yourself, just a topic, like whenever you really actually put yourself into something and really care about it, that also becomes magnetic. And people really appreciate you for your knowledge, your skill, just for the passion that you have for something. You should just keep remembering that. This video's gotten pretty long. I think I'm gonna do runestones. I'm gonna do new moon stuff hopefully later this week. And I'm gonna do runestones then, if that's okay with you. I think it's actually gonna fit more of that general vibe better anyway. And I think I've been talking at you for long enough right now. But I promise I will do them later. I hope that was helpful to you. Some predictive stuff, but also just a lot of advice. Hopefully that resonates with you. It makes sense, maybe explains what you're going through, what you're thinking. I hope it helps you find some direction. Just make sense of what's going on now. And you can let me know what you think if you have any follow-up questions or any more kind of details you wanted to add. Because once again, my knowledge of real estate, not great. But yeah, let me know what you're thinking.